Welcome to the Coolcast. I'm your co-host today, Nathan Brandt, and I am joined with the indomitable, I'm going to bring that back, indomitable Francis Stroll, who has returned from California. So today we're going to be talking about his trip to the CBA meeting. We've got some updates on some stuff, and then we're going to answer a bunch of questions, some of them from the internet and some of them from our viewers like you.
Which is also the internet. So they're all from the internet.
What if they called us and they asked us to write down their question?
I don't think that happened.
Our phones are through the internet.
That would be super cool.
That would be cool.
That would be cool.
You should just start asking people that call you, hey, you have any questions for us that we could answer on the Coolcast today?
I mean, I've answered questions on the Coolcast based off of phone calls I've gotten recently.
Yeah, but
that are interesting.
I want names and addresses that we can publish.
A little totalitarian, but...
Well, no. So people can send them, get well soon cards.
Why would they be sick?
All our customers are sick. You know? All right, so Francis, take it from the top. Tell us all about CBA and, talk about the things.
Oh, usually when you say talk about the things, you expound upon what the things are. So my flight at 6 a.m. flew into Denver, and if you have United, which I think this might be a new feature for all airlines, but I experienced it on United. The moment your plane lands, it tells you what gate your connecting flight is at, how long it takes to get there, and then the rough, it said, turn left and follow signage, So it kind of told you how to get to where you were going. And it said, plane departs in 18 minutes. But it was the next gate over, so I was, pretty excited. And then immediately upon getting one gate over, it was oh, your plane is delayed by 2 hours. It's all right. Turns out the flight coming in was a little bit late, and then that was the changeover of crew. I don't know what to call flight attendants. But changeover in crew, so it was a pretty easy flight. There wasn't a ton of havoc, but did experience a 2-hour delay. And then I got a tiny rental car, which the lady tried to warn me about, but I did not listen because I thought, it's just a car, I'll fit. And then I didn't.
You do need to remember when you go into these situations that you're abnormally lengthed.
I am... And I know I say this every time you call me tall, but I am genuinely as tall as you can be and still be normal height. I'm not grossly tall.
It's pretty gross.
But it was a Nissan
Altima.
Mm-hmm. And if you are above 6'2", you won't fit. So just a heads up to the listeners, but I got in on Tuesday and had maybe the best pad see ew. Got pad see ew with squid, and it was maybe the best I've ever had. And then I slept, and then I woke up and started setting up for the show. Immediately got very excited when I started hearing about some of the demonstrations going on, what they were doing. The volunteers got a quick kind of example demonstration from one of the presenters, Adrian, who came all the way over from England because he was coming so far. He didn't bring any example materials, so he built all his example materials that day, and that was really cool because it wasn't for the general public. He felt a little bit more comfortable going slow and kind of, we could ask a bunch of different questions. He's really, really funny. The only person I've ever seen, can I say take the piss out of? I feel like that's a very British thing to say.
He'll just blink it out.
Yeah. So he's the only guy I've ever seen take the piss out of Mark Asbury. Mark Asbury is very stoic, very respectable, and they were joking around like they were childhood friends, which they may or may not be. They have a history together, but it was a really great demonstration from him on Thursday, and then Wednesday. And then on Thursday, we opened up the official show, had a lot of people come out. I got to watch a little bit of Ira Houseworth's demonstration with his helper, James. Watched Adrian again. When I go to these events, a lot of times it is, Wednesday you set up and you're really, really busy and it's a 10-hour day in the sun. You come back on Thursday and then you just kind of stand around because there's demonstrations going on. And then when they break out for lunch, that's when I'm busy. And then they go back in their demonstrations. And then after like 4 or 5 o'clock, when the demonstrations and the group projects are done, then they come up and they ask questions and whatnot. So that was kind of same with this. I got to walk away from the table a few times and just kind of guerrilla market. I'm wearing a shirt that says Coal Crew, and people would grab me and say, "Hey, you're here with Coal Ironworks. I have questions." And I'd say, "Yeah, absolutely. What's going on? Like, let's step 30 feet to our right so that we're not interrupting." And everybody was really respectful of the demonstrations. And because of that, they would be like, "Well, let me talk to you later." So after 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, I'd be really busy, be there until 7 o'clock, go home. Friday had a lot of people come out. I made the not mistake, but I always forget that when I bring out a press and a punch and stripper set, people immediately think that we're doing a hammer making event. Especially if I have material, like I had some material on display. Like I wasn't selling a ton. I was selling A33 because it's hard to get, but my 4140 and 1045, I just kind of brought out to show people, hey, we guys sell this so that you don't have to buy a $600 bar. You can just buy however many hammers you're making. And there was a young guy that came out and bought some A33, and he punched his eye a little wonky. And I, would have loved to been smart enough on the front end to bring out either hammer station dies or fullering dies to be able to fix that for him. But we didn't, and he took that off and started working it by hand, which I felt terrible for. If you've ever worked 1.5 inch A33 by hand, it's not fun.
No.
And then another guy came up and said, "Hey, I'm going to grab you. I want to buy this piece of material and make a hammer." And I said, "Hey, man, we're really only going to be able to punch the eye. Everything else you'll probably have to do by hand. But I would love to punch and drift with you, And he was like, "Okay." And then he came back at the end of the day and he was like, "Hey, can we just do it tomorrow morning?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And then I went to do a induction forge demonstration, which I wasn't going to take induction forges because there was no electricity. And then John called me and said, "Hey, I've got generators. Go ahead and bring the induction forges out." I fired up the generator and turned the induction forge on. I got one good heat out of it. I was like, "All right, guys, this is, I think I used the 1 1/4 bar. I said, this is no, it was the 3/4 bar. This is the 3/4 bar and 1.5 inch coil. So it's a little oversized. If you're matching coil, the whole teaching people about induction." And then I go to heat it up and I'm like, that took 30 seconds to get to a red heat. That's a little odd. And so we go back, turn the throttle up a little bit on the generator, and then go back over, and it's completely airing out. And I'm not like, so a generator isn't, anytime I would press the foot pedal, it would like sounded like I was throwing it into a body of water.
Yeah.
And so I immediately shut it down. I said, "Hey guys, I don't want to hurt the machine. I obviously am not pulling a full 30 off of this machine, so it's struggling, and the machine's airing out. It's not getting enough current." And immediately two people came up and bought the induction forges. The first guy is same guy that bought a 16-ton from us last year at the show. His name's Ken Rogers. Great guy. Got to spend even more time with him this year, just talking about some of his experiences in life and more like buddy talk than just being there to sell. And then the other guy is a anvil collector, and he said that when he saw the induction forge being run, he immediately turned around and called Aaron Sergel, and he has a press that we had sold to Aaron Sergel, and Aaron did some slight modification to it and then sent it to him. And he said he called Aaron, and Aaron said, "Buy it. Don't ask any questions, because by the time you get back to him, he will have it sold." He said, buy it. It'll change everything. So Aaron's always been super good to us. Aaron's a good dude. He's bought a lot of our machines, and that's kind of what he does. He buys machines, runs them for a little while, gets rid of them, buys another one. Great dude. The guy was telling me about how he has got a good enough relationship with him that he really understands the style, the era, all of what he looks for in an anvil. Mm-hmm. And so he just gets a call every 3 or 4 months and is like, hey, I got 5 anvils for you.
Yeah.
And Aaron takes care of him on that level. So his trust level with him was very high. Mm-hmm. So for Aaron to speak well of us and give him confidence in us, that felt really good to know that the communities, everybody's got each other's back, even though I'm 15 hours away from home. So, by car, I don't, that's way more than 15 hours. That's
you're like 30 hours.
Yeah. It's 12 hours of driving and flying combined. So, but they ended up buying stuff. Both the presses we sent out were pre-sold. The material had a great response, sold a bunch of material, was able to give away some material and just love on the community. And this year was a lot more interaction, which was cool. I got to talk to 2 young guys who had just started a woodworking and blacksmithing business and give them hopefully not advice that they take.
I hope I didn't give them advice that they listen to.
Yeah, that it's always a precarious situation that you get put in when you get younger guys that come up and ask you like, hey, what should I do? Because every situation's different.
That's my favorite question.
There's going to be nuances.
I love to tell people what to do.
But they were specifically asking I think they were brothers, and if they weren't brothers, they were brothers in the same way that you and I are.
Brothers in Christ.
Right. And only. Glad you made that distinction.
Uh-huh.
So one of them wants to full force, this is it. This is my life. I'm committed. The other one has the opportunity to go to Italy for college for a couple years and wants to continue supporting the business, but doesn't want to be a drain on the business by going to Italy. And so they were asking some kind of bigger questions than just like, hey, what's the best handsaw I can get? You know? Right. And I got to spend a lot of time with them. They were really good kids. And in the same way, they reminded me a lot of you and Andy, specifically in your interactions with like Jeff Reinhold, where they weren't having a conversation with me. They were asking questions and then listening.
Yeah.
And asking about some of the problems that we had come up against and some of the, the headbutting that had taken place. Like, hey, I genuinely love this guy. How do I convince him that this is a viable option? And my advice was essentially like start out at farmers markets, take stuff that's pre-sold, and then tell people you do custom work. You don't have to take everything to sell. Some things can be examples, and if they sell, they sell. But my big advice that, I walked away from feeling good that I thought of it in the moment and wasn't like, oh crap, I should have told them, was they didn't have a mortgage or rent or car insurance or a phone bill. And I said, allocate those things in your budget and spend that money on tooling. Buy yourself the capability to do bigger projects, bid machines, even if it's a $50 bandsaw that you saw on Facebook Marketplace, bid that into your next deal and, or deal that into your next bid and see where it goes. And if it ends up, you have to change courses or, whatever, then you're still prepared because you have physical capability on hand.
Right.
And then their dad came up and was like, hey, this is awesome. Thank you so much. You get a lot of these guys out here that, and I don't think it was the CBA in general because the CBA is very, very supporting, but he said you get a lot of these guys out here that are like, oh, it's not worth it. You can't make $1 anymore. If I were to start my business right now, it'd be collapsed within 2 years. And, he said, thank you so much for like giving them some sort of advice that might be helpful. And then I started talking to the kids again, and he had mentioned, he said something. He said, I like to just ask a question and see where it goes and just listen. And so we kept talking, and then his brother said, yeah, you never know what people are going to know And this little kid walked up and he was like, well, my daddy's an electrician, and started teaching us about electricity. He was like 7 years old.
Yeah.
I think his name was Griffin. He was awesome.
Shout out Griffin.
Shout out Griffin. But that was Saturday night. Yeah, I had a great time. I want to specifically say thank you to Greg and to John. John is who we ship all of our stuff to and encouraged us to bring out the induction forges. He obviously receives the pallets, looks over them while people come and pick them up, does extra work and expects nothing in return. He's a part of NOMA. He's a part of CBA. He's on the board for Urbana. He's involved in a lot of the same things we are, and he wants to see us succeed. I took him to lunch and to kind of thank him for everything, and got to spend more time with him this year than last year. Got to go out to his shop, which is really cool. He's got a couple 88 strikers. He's got an old Beaudry that is the motor and the strap are mounted to the ceiling. And it's an old leather strap. And I don't know if he intentionally has it leather strap to make it look cool, but
Probably just came with one.
it might have just, and he hasn't updated it, but like
I mean, the leather belts are good for basically 100 years.
super cool, especially with it being strapped to the ceiling and not to the floor. And I just never seen a setup like that. And it's like outside under a lean-to, and I was super cool.
Literally in that photo right there. That's a Bradley.
Yeah.
Same idea. That guy died. In that one, though.
It's rough. I mean, I'd assume based off the age of the photo, I'd assume he'd be dead.
Yeah, he got pulled up into the line shaft.
Okay. Sad.
Yep.
Anyway, he's got when you walk into his office, he does like gates and railings and stuff, and when you walk in, he's got different examples of twists or handbars or whatever, and then you go around the side of his shop, and he has probably 5 or 6 cantilever racks that are just filled with prefabbed enough to save you a lot of time and effort when you start a project, but also where they could still be customizable, changed a little bit at the install. So I thought his setup was super cool. When you walk into his actual shop, the fabrication is all either laid on a table or laid on a ground, and the only thing in front of you is the actual project you're working on, which I thought was, oh God, if we could just get to a point where the only thing we're working on is in front of us.
Yeah.
If we could get to a point where we can think about one thing, that would be stellar. So specifically, thank you to John McClellan and all the guys that work at his shop for putting up with our crap and being in your way. And then Greg Hudgens, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name right. Greg Hudgens, he is their quartermaster at the CBA, and he specifically arranges delivery to the show setup, where everything's going to be. And he is flying around constantly, would just come over and ask me if I was good. I've been trying not to drink soda, and I told him I really want a soda. It's like really hot out. And he brought me a liter of Coca-Cola. And then snuck me into the banquet dinner. And also Linda, thank you, Linda, for always being supportive of what we're doing, checking in on us, allowing me to take an extra volunteer cup. It's I don't want to downput anybody, and I'm not going to mention anybody by name because everybody's obviously got what they're dealing with, but we get to experience a lot of blacksmithing groups and guilds and associations, and we are spoiled rotten by IBA.
Yeah.
Steve and Jeff and Rob and Paul and Kurt, even Kevin. These guys just want to get the work done. They don't care about the politics. They don't care about, it's just about the work. Mm-hmm. Whether you're left or right, atheist, Christian, black, white, it is, we're here together on something we can agree upon, and we're all going to enjoy it while we do it. Mm-hmm. And that's the only purpose. Mm-hmm. Even going back to when we first started going to shows, or not shows, the first IBA meetings I went to with you, we always joke that it's like grumpy old men, but it's because they wanted to do the work, and they wanted to have something to relate to you. And if you started working on something they didn't teach, they don't want to make knives. They don't want to make, an 8-pound axe. So we're spoiled rotten. And you go to a lot of these shows, and people tend to talk, and there's a lot of like gossipy, oh, well, that's so-and-so. He's going to come up and ask you this. Just pay him no mind. He's a big, whatever. The CBA, to me, is the most reminiscent of the IBA. Everybody out there, the guys and gals that attend that show, attend with the demonstration in mind that they're going to go to. They're really amped out about it. And when they come, they might ask a couple questions about the presses, and then they'll try to, like, you have to come help with this project. You have to come see this demonstration. And just the community that they have out there is super supportive. I'd go grab lunch and go sit at a table by myself, and inevitably somebody would come up. Hey, you're sitting alone. What's going on? Let's be friends. Ended up meeting a guy named Doug, who is he's a journalist for their magazine. Got to do an interview with him. Had a really good talk with him that won't be published. And I don't think he'll mind if I share. He used to be a teacher. And we were talking about what the difference is in generation and how it's affected manufacturing. And it got kind of a little bit more deep than just, well, they moved this to here and now we don't have the buildings and the infrastructure, and had a really good talk about kind of society in general and how, and I don't know, Evan, strike this if it's a little bit too much for the podcast, but talked about fatherlessness in the home and how important it is to society and to every aspect of society for fathers to be in the home. And, the point that I made was you can, I'm not going to say you can learn or you can tell when somebody doesn't have a father in the home. That I don't think that's true, but, there are things that you learn from a father being in the home. And the big thing is confidence, and confidence oftentimes equates to willingness. Mm-hmm. So, I don't think it's any shock or surprise, or I don't think it's controversy to say over the past 50, 60, 70 years, we've lost a large percentage of fathers in the homes. And so when he's teaching these kids engineering, they had a project that would be make it bigger, faster, smaller, better, whatever, make an improvement to this machine. And I think they had to do it in a certain amount of time. Mm-hmm. And he said people would walk into it and just expect somebody to say, here's what I expect out of you. This is, I want you to make it, 3 rotations faster on a blender, or, this. And he said that people just have lost their confidence. And because of the loss of confidence, you hire somebody who, let's just say 1950. This is completely made up. I'm not bringing this on any stats whatsoever. But let's say in 1950, you hire somebody and you work in a small machine shop. At 18 years old, you walk them up to a lathe and you say, I'm going to teach you how to operate this lathe safely. They would then have the confidence and the trust in another person after having a father in their life who can teach them and lead them and trust that they are doing it with, earnest intentions. And he said, now when you try to instruct somebody, it's almost like offensive to them. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, what I'm doing is right. It's not. And I want you to do better. And I am here to provide you with the skills and the knowledge to be able to do these things. But you have to be able to take some sort of constructive criticism. You have to be able to be gently guided to the right place. There is also a drawback to the overbearing, domineering. You see it in movies and TV shows and a lot of documentaries where the foreman walks out and he's like, we're 15,000 units behind, and this is bull crap, and this is bull crap. And it gets very belittling. But there's also something very much so to be said for a loss of that confidence and not being able to go up to somebody and say, hey, I would like, if this was done differently, here's why. Let's do it together. That mentorship, that fatherly role in somebody's life.
I think though too, I mean, you made the comment about fatherlessness, but I think there's also a component of that where we've had such a breakdown of community where people can't, there is no sense of oneness or unity within the communities. And so there's a really big lack of trust, which is kind of what you were pointing to. And people are struggling to communicate on a consistent basis. Everyone thinks that someone else is out to get them. I mean, it's so reminiscent of like, you know, you're going to get called in for being whatever, whatever the offensive person.
Your press is here. I don't want to unload it.
We have to have an intermission.
We
I have a new machine.
toys coming. We'll take a break.
It's huge.
Yeah, there's no way it's 2,700 pounds.
No, that forklift won't pick that up. There's no way.
And we're back from our intermission, unloading a beautiful 19-something Roussel 6A.
I'm going to guess late 70s, early 80s based off of the font.
Yeah, I think the Faircute press that we have is probably early 30s.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that's a much newer machine.
Yeah.
The guarding is much nicer. The gears are much better cut. The Faircute's got a funky arrangement.
Yeah.
They like cut the gear, like half of it, and they're like, that's good.
That's good. That'll work. So we were talking about the epidemic of fatherlessness and how it's impacted.
Well, and really, I think the point I was
light
making
topics.
was communities have imploded, and there's such estrangement from thy neighbor, and there's this thing that creeps in following that, where people become very suspicious of the intentions of one another. And that sounds like a little bit of what was the guy's name that you were? Doug. Sounds a little bit like what he was saying, like as he's trying to teach these students, there's a suspicion of his intention or something, you know? Or maybe it's just a sense of like, well, I can't not know something already.
Yeah.
Right? But, you know, either way, I think the hardship of the current era, you know, as frustrating as it may be, is great incentive for people to look to one another within their communities and within, you know, whether it's, you know, in our metalworking community or our, you know, small town of 47 people where I live. It's just like I want to build resiliency in the communications with them and my kids to come up in a community of, you know, there's not automatic suspicion of everyone that's trying to help.
Right. There's a part of self-reliance where you have to give in to the fact that you can never be wholly self-reliant.
Our communities can be
Our
self-reliant.
communities have to be self-reliant. And so, you know, the analogy, actually me and Kurt Holland talked about this before. I wish we would have talked about it during his podcast, but this was when we were very fresh in the podcast, and I thought we had to stay on the topic of just knives and blacksmithing and exactly what they were doing. And but, you know, there's I think it's called the Dunbar number is 150, and that's how many loving relationships any human being can hold. Anything more than that, and you genuinely cannot hold compassion or empathy for other people. So I believe that we were created and molded for communities of around 150 people, and that oddly enough is aligns with most specialties. So if we are relying as a community, what I mean by that is, you know, we're self-reliant as far as family units for the moral and educational growth of our children, the emotional support of dealing with a loss or, you know, the upbringing of a family. But the community can be self-reliant in the fact of you have dairy cows. I am looking to get some sheep for some wool. You know, Evan has got chickens. I live in a cornfield, so my neighbors clearly have corn, soybean, you know, and together you still need clothing so you can have some wool. We'll probably end up going out and hunting at some point and getting some leather. So, you know, we can all provide into a community pot, but when you get more than 150, you genuinely can't hold those relationships where you can trust, hey, sorry, my cows were a little undersized this year. We don't have enough meat. like we're going to have to ration it as a community. You start to get suspicious, like you said, because you can't hold that relationship the same way. And I think that, this kind of goes back to the fatherlessness thing, because people aren't getting the full support of two parents. There's the old adage of it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it for dang sure takes more than one. Mm-hmm. And, that's not to say anything negative or down-putting or off-putting about single moms. Everybody's in a different situation, and I don't think that anybody sets out to do that. Mm-hmm. And I genuinely believe that they try their best. But I do think that is a challenge for us as men, that we should take up that mantle and accept that we have failed society as a whole. And we need to figure out a way to bring that back. And I think it does go back into being a part of a community, and also, side point, maybe different tangent, but there's a lot of people that experience fatherlessness with their father in their home. Mm-hmm. We're not being what we're meant to be, and we're not providing the way that we're meant to provide. And this is also a rant from a dude with no kids who's single in his mid-30s. But I also grew up in a family with a loving father. With, if any of you have ever heard me talk about my father, my dad is my hero. He raised 4 ugly children. He led a great example of what it means to be a man, and how to lead a family, and how to be a strong point and a pillar in his community. And because I have that example, I don't think it makes me an authority on the subject or anything by the means. It makes him an authority on the subject. We should have Scott Stroll on the podcast. But I do think that that's something that we can all challenge ourselves to do and to get more involved with, and kind of take back and reclaim our communities and become more self-reliant, because the future depends on it. And we can't continue this way. We can't run a town, let alone a nation, off of a population that has no confidence, doesn't know how to interact with respect. You hear a lot of old people talk about, like, well, your generation just has no respect. They kind of have a point, and
just look at the Minecraft movie.
Throwing popcorn everywhere for no reason. I saw a toilet paper roll in there too. Like,
they came prepared.
They came prepared for that. They were intending on destruction. And even with our generation, and I definitely understand it and empathize with it for the younger generation, I would be dead set on destruction, because what we have established is not the way that it should be.
Yeah.
And I had a really good conversation with him about that. And then he interviewed me for just about like what Cole does and whatnot. And at the end, I kind of snuck in. He asked me, like, what else do you have to say? And I was like, dude, we all have to like rally together. Like, just go make something, go do something, be productive, get some wind in your sails, fail and carry on. It doesn't matter what side of the spectrum you fall on as far as beliefs or the way you live your life or your upbringing. We're all in this together, and we have to meet at some sort of mutual point and say, what can we do? And I genuinely believe that starts in the home and in the community, mm-hmm. and what kind of impact you can have. And that's given me, in the past 5 or 6 days since I've had that conversation, it's given me a lot of time to sit. Well, aside from sleeping, I've been sleeping a lot. But it's given me time to think and about what I can do and what we can do as a company. And I think the school is a good start, and we've already reached out to like the Boy Scouts and the local art museum and stuff like that to host classes. But what can we do to be even more involved and be beneficial to people, and just put some wind in their sails, and make people understand that they do have control of some of their outcomes. And if we all do this together, then the world's a better place for it. There's no scenario where we work together and we fail. Obviously there's going to be better scenarios and better actions that can take, but that's also life. Like, you're never going to take the perfect actions, and you're never going to find the perfect way out. That's not what life's about. But we've so lost the red cord. You know, we're not following.
Great band.
We're not following what we're what gives us meaning. You know, we're not following that. We're following instant indulgences.
Yeah, well, but I think that's a result of aimlessness,
Right.
Generally, you know, I think a national perspective devoid of small community perspective is misguided, and I think that's kind of what you're saying. We should probably move on to the second topic. So we're just gonna let that happen. Speaking of the school, so up next, bro, you good? All right. Speaking of the school, our next class coming up is Intro to the Forged Blade with, once again, the indomitable Brett Onique. And last week, I was going to mention that his last name is very similar to my favorite Pokemon, Onyx, whose famous attack is the Thumpalanche. Just some fun facts with Nate this fine April morning. So May 3rd, this class is filling up, but we have spots available. If you would like to see right there, Evan told me that wasn't real. It was Onyx and Snorlax. I identified with Snorlax. I was a very chubby kid, and he was easy to draw. Yeah. So, Intro to the Forged Blade, Brett Onyx, Onyx. Now I'm going to call him Brett Onyx because of the Thumpalanche boy. So, Brett's going to be doing the Intro to the Forged Blade. He is an incredible teacher. He's an incredible human being. I am better for knowing him. Truly. I think we all are.
Yeah.
Talk about community driven. Finally, K75s. They're live. We're building them. The orders are rolling in. Thank you to everyone supporting the launch. If you have questions, please reach out to us. Let us know. We would be elated.
I also fixed the bug where it was not shipping to certain zip codes.
But he also caused the bug.
Nope. Evan
So
caused the bug.
just keep that in mind.
Evan did it.
Evan isn't in shipping.
Evan updated the profile.
I wasn't even here.
Just
Evan updated the profile, and then it lost the shipping information.
So we're going to introduce our new segment today. This is Nathan Reads Reddit, and we went to Reddit to answer your questions. And our question today, by the way, there is some dramatization of these questions when I read them, just FYI. So if you're the commenter or poster of these questions and you're mad that I made you sound like you've never spelled anything in your life, sorry, but it's much funnier if I read it that way. So Korok Sniper King asked, I just started blacksmithing. I've started making my tongs and punch. Now I have question. What burn cream recommended may already be relevant? We'll start there. Do you have a favorite burn cream?
Aloe vera with lidocaine.
Aloe vera with lidocaine.
Yep.
So it's going to desensitize your nerves.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a painkiller. I don't like when I got my teeth removed as a kid, they would give you hydrocodone. I didn't like that because it was like nothing hurt. You want to know what area is sensitive,
Even
but it
the
takes
sads.
the sting out.
Got the sads away.
Yeah, it took away the
I know how
sads.
much you hate that.
But I like the lidocaine. It takes the sting out and then has a little gentle cooling effect. Also, whatever Airmark provides as a burn cream in our cabinet does okay. I don't have a preferred brand or anything like that. Just aloe vera with lidocaine, I think, is my go-to.
So I never put burn cream on, but if I get a burn, first thing I do is I run over and I grab a water bottle out of the fridge, and then I hold it on the burn until the water bottle's not cold anymore. And because one of the things that I found is if I can cool the burn down super, super quickly, like the meat is hot and it's burning itself, and so I got to get some of that temp out.
Quench tank. Just shove your hand in a quench
Yeah,
tank.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless you have an open wound, then maybe
Well,
don't. If it's a third degree, you got some muscle tendons popping from the burning. Maybe go to the hospital. But at the first hammer in, we forged a massive stainless cross, and I sat with a very large rosebud on our vise, heating that cross, and immediately after, young, beautiful Corbin, in his sweet innocence, deposited his hand juices
Succinctly.
directly on, had a nice big vice jaw-shaped burn. Yeah, it was hot. It was hot.
Yeah.
This is a dramatic photo.
I love this picture.
That's a great
That's a
picture.
good picture.
Of everyone, of all the people. I would like to highlight that there's a man with red hair behind me, and my hair color is distinctly not ginger.
Your beard is the same color as his hair, though.
It's not. Look at it. It's not.
Your beard
Look
is
at
the
it.
same color as
Well,
his hair.
I had to shave my beard because I have a 0-year-old, and she gets her little. Babies are so strong.
Yep.
She gets her little finger nuggets right in here, and then she goes, and just blood. Throat blood. Next question. How long should a piece of steel be hot and workable per heat? I was doing about 1 minute in forge and worked a minute. Yeah, that's right. Unfortunately. Now, here's a hot tip. Your body is going to go into fight or flight the moment you pull that steel out of the forge. It's going to tell you, this timer is counting down. Hurry up.
Yep.
And it's a mistake. Make sure before you take it out of the forge, let her cook. Make sure your stuff's ready.
Calculated blows.
And then take it out and do what needs done. And when it's dull red, put it back. When it's that color, magenta, put it back in the forge. Don't keep working it, unless you've got some planishing blows. Red's for planishing. But yeah, that's about right. It's not very long.
In
Now,
the words of Kurt, I don't know why you want to work that hard. Get it hot.
look at that. That's a T-shirt.
Yeah. I don't know why you want to work
know
that
what we
hard.
need? We need a line of Kurt quote T-shirts.
Oh, I've got 5 right off the rip. 5.
Well, they have what would Clifton do hats. Now we need some Kurt ones.
Yep.
Is forge scale unavoidable? I know I need to use wire brush, but is anything can do to decrease?
Also, before we answer that question, let me just say this. If you're working with low carbon, stop telling me about burning up carbon. That's like one of my least favorite things.
You can ruin it.
You can ruin it, but when I go to, say, like we do that beer event where we go out and it's a bunch of beer vendors and we just make bottle openers with the people, and I'm working with little 1/4 inch pieces. And if you've taken 2 or 3 blacksmithing classes and you ask me about whether or not I'm going to burn the carbon out of it, no. The answer is no.
Probably not.
I'm not going to burn the carbon out of
The
it.
first year that we went to SOFA, we took a forge, a little forge. It was one that I had bought. It was a gas forge that I had bought at SOFA as a child. I referenced it in my last podcast that I was alone for, Francis. And I had done a run of copper jewelry in the forge, and turned out I had contaminated the forge with copper. If you contaminate your forge with a copper-based alloy, it will do something to the steel. And so I was forging on the press, and everything I was forging was crumbling and falling apart on the ground and just adding to the gravel. Couldn't figure it out. It was because it was copper. Scale is unavoidable. You can mitigate it with making sure you have a reducing environment in your forge. That means that it's gas plentiful. So you'll see guys that are forge welding, they'll have a huge dragon's breath blowing out the front of their forge. That means that they're pumping more gas than can be consumed. The gas is a evacuating the forge body and combusting once it has sufficient oxygen outside of the forge chamber. That's a good indication that you have a reducing environment. So you can turn your gas up a little bit, turn your blower a little bit down, or if it's Venturi, turn your pressure down, shut your Venturi up a little bit. Obviously, there's some level that just can't be avoided. Blown burners generally have worse oxidation than Venturis because they have forced air, but they're more efficient. So that's that. Also, Jeff Reinhardt told me that at the Ford shop at Voigt, they would take scale out by the train car. So that makes me feel inferior. How do you draw out material from a narrow piece? I'm using rebar. It's just what I have. We'll use better stuff. Start by flattening section with face of the hammer, then tried using both sides of the cross-peen hammer to stretch it out. Didn't work great. I probably just need more practice, but tips welcome. We just had a question in the emails about this. How do I fuller a piece? So this is a knife that was made in a video that's never been posted. Shout out, Evan.
Great. Now we're canceled on Instagram.
This will make. Is that focusing?
No.
AVE has a really funny quip that he says when his camera won't focus, but I can't say it on this podcast. Shout out AVE on YouTube. Get my hands. Is that okay? Is that better? Okay, so this will make your piece longer. And if you're not watching this is I'm pressing in a drift.
It's terrible radio.
As a fullering die, okay? So if I do it, this will make your piece longer. This will make your piece wider. So if you're trying to make, like I want to pull this heel down, I would, just think of it like a rolling pin. You're rolling the material out, but you're just squishing it. So that's my answer. What was the question?
Also, the material has to be there. There is a small component. You're right. Everything you just said is right. But there is also a small component of you're not going to get a knife from half-inch rebar.
I mean, yeah, but I will tell you, there's more material in there than you think. And if you go thin enough, you can pull it pretty darn far.
Right.
I agree with you. I think what he's saying, though, is if he has a bar that's shaped like this and he's trying to draw it out and he's hitting this, excuse me, it's going to squish and roll. So you want to go hit, and that'll help square it up as you're drawing it out. So
hit turn, baby, hit turn.
Hit turn, baby. So now we're going to move down to our main discussion.
Okay.
Functional forging. So we're going to be talking about the overlap between need, design, and durability. Shop tools, farm hardware, real stuff that gets used. So I'm gonna talk real quick about something that I've been doing personally, which is scavenging bad old die plates from everywhere I can find. Having some die plates now for a Coal Ironworks press, you have a proprietary die design. So if you want the basis of that, if you have a 12-ton, it's just a little piece of flat bar, and you can drill 2 holes and have a die. But have some of that stuff prepped. And so then as I'm thinking through, I was going to bring some examples. I forgot. As I'm working on a project, and I'm like, man, it would be really nice if I had a fuller on in this spot, and then like a little butcher right here, so that I can get the material isolated just like I want it, and I can tack it on a die plate, hit it a few times and check it. If it works, I'll weld it up. Maybe I'll use tool steel. But it's that idea that you should cardboard and tape it for V1.
Right.
There's your rough draft. So get it together really quick, and then when you're done, zip the parts off. You got a clean blank die plate for your next little operation, because a lot of times in blacksmithing, you're going to be doing one operation maybe 15 times, and then that die's going to sit on the shelf. Don't waste it.
Yeah.
Take a picture of it so you remember. I like to take a picture of it, and I'll usually keep a piece. So I know my starting stock material and all that kind of stuff. I'll use that as kind of my storyboard of a project to help me. Just snap a picture, put all the pieces, use them, whatever. But keeping some blank die plates handy is super helpful, so that you can rough draft.
I don't think that was the question at all. I'm just going to say that out loud.
Well, you know what? That was my topic. That was my take.
I think this was more about what the difference between maybe a gate installation is compared to like, you know, the tines on a plow. Like when you're forging functional compared to forging form.
Well, it's all together.
Is it? Is that even remotely close to the topic that you just covered?
Evan asked this question.
Evan asked the question. Evan, who's more correct?
I plead the fifth.
He is of the Socratic mind, so he cannot answereth.
Okay, so the way that I have taken this question is this week's conversation is all about the function over form. Why forging with a purpose is one of the most rewarding parts of the craft. The way I took that was when you forge something to be used, when you forge something with a function, that is much more rewarding than something that you're just forging out to form. And I would both agree and disagree because of the conversation that we had a couple weeks ago, where when you are forging for function, you are forging within the bounds of, I don't know why you're continuing to make the face. When you are forging for function, you're forging within the bounds of the function itself. So if I need to make a camp axe that is going to be carried on the hip while you're camping and, you know, possibly hiking the Appalachian Trail, Appalachian, whatever you pronounce it, I am stuck within that form of something that is 2 pounds.
Did you drink my LaCroix?
I did, yeah. I had a coughing fit. I don't know if you heard that.
I did.
I've got a really, really weak gag sense. So if I cough hard, I gag. And then for like 20 minutes, I feel like I'm going to throw up. So we're still in that kind of phase. And I needed water to push the throw up back down. You know, just simple stuff.
My dip can, so I liked it.
It would have worked either way. So I'm stuck within that form of small needs to be carried, needs to be sharp. When I'm function, when I'm forging to form, you get to be a little bit more adaptable, and you get to kind of use your creativity to say, oh, you know, I think this scroll would look better with, you know, 3 scrolls, or say you're making a lollipop and it's like, well, it's just not big enough. I get to make it bigger. Where if I'm forging within function, I don't get to make those creative outlets. So there is a lot of, it feels good to make something and know somebody's going to use it for a long time. Like I made a hammer for our friend Nate up in Warsaw, and he now uses it to teach classes to people making Damascus and hammers, and they're not allowed to make knives, but I'm sure they get to go home with the Damascus bar they made and make knives because they're in a school setting. But there's also something very, very rewarding about going out and sitting in my yard and watching the birds and knowing like, hey, I made that bird feeder, or I made that shepherd's hook, or, you know, I want to put a sign on my barn and I want to forge out the sign holder. And it's like every time I walk into my barn, it's going to be like, oh yeah, that's cool. Which goes back to also a conversation we had where in 5 years, I'm going to look at it and be like, that is no longer cool. I can do so much better.
Well, I think one of the things that I find really helpful about blacksmithing, and probably just as much with carpentry too and woodworking, but blacksmithing is my bent, is the ability to identify function out of existing form. So, for example, you know, I'm planning this big shop expansion at my farm, and I went to an auction and bought vintage lamp posts because they're cool and they're structural and they're huge.
And they're way bigger than you thought they were.
Way bigger.
Yeah.
No, they had the listing at like 12 foot, and I went to pick them up, and they were 25 feet tall. Yeah. Which is sick. I mean, that's super sick. But I find a lot of value in being able to take what's existing around me and make it. You know, you can. A great example on my forge door, I had built a tensioning system, a pneumatic tensioning system for an old belt grinder that we bought, and bad idea, didn't work great, dismantled it. But then I had it, and I kept it because I hoard. And when I was building the forge door, I was like, oh my gosh, it's exactly what I need. It's a foot pedal actuated bumba-lumba-dun. And so I put it on the forge door. It worked great. I find a lot of joy in taking what I have amassed, the old adage of the blacksmith's scrap pile, and dig through it and find things that I can use for other things, just with a little bit of forging, a little bit of finesse, a little ingenuity. Like I find a lot of creative outlet in repurposing, and I obviously appreciate old stuff, and so I feel like I get to participate in the lineage of that tool or piece of equipment. I recently dismantled a beautiful 3-ton chain hoist that was in terrible disrepair because I can use the sprocket and chain for turning this device I'm designing, and it's super cool. It's like it's way better than if I just went and bought some pulleys and a piece of cable. It's like sick. So I find it's a creative outlet to pull function out of existing form. Secondly, I hear your point. I think there's an aspect of blacksmithing where as a problem-solving device, form gets put secondhand. But I feel a little bit bad about that because I am a very function over form person to a fault, and I will say that I think that it loses a little bit. And I think this is what people complain about. It loses a little bit of the characteristics of the historical expectation of blacksmithing being a beautiful. There's a guy on YouTube. I don't know his name. I couldn't even tell you. He is building his like machine shop, blacksmithing shop, and everything in it is like earlier than 1900. It's like he's got line shafts running his big cast iron lathe, and he wanted to build a shop crane. And I think he's over in the UK. He forged a shop crane. And I mean, it could have been in one of these historical photos that I've got all around the shop. Like, he did such a good job. It is so beautiful. It is aesthetically beautiful. It is functionally great. Like, he did a great job. It's got big chunky bearings, works wonderful. So, I think we have to kind of marry the two when you're in a farm setting and you're just trying to get something back to square and all that. Sure, I understand.
Right.
But, one of the kids that he's a cousin of mine, I think he's a cousin, or I'm his, I don't know, he's a nephew. I don't know what he is to me.
You're his cousin, but he's not your cousin.
He's like my he's my cousin's son.
Second cousin, maybe?
Is that second cousin?
Second cousin, maybe?
Anyway, he had a shop at my uncle's house, who's a farmer, sheep farmer. If you want to learn about sheep, this man knows everything there is to know about sheep. Like 4-H champion, like generational heritage bred, had the largest flock of the oldest sheep variety in the United States for a while. But he said, what did he say? They could like they're actively trying to die.
Oh,
Just
yeah, sheep are
constantly.
dumb.
Well, this sheep breed in general is like they cannot eat anything except fresh grass. If they eat anything else, they just die. But their wool is sought after. All this stuff. Anyway, he would, every time I go over there, Christian would be like, hey, I want to show you. And he had like forged a special hinge that could actuate in both, articulate in both directions, so they could like maneuver this fence so that they could get the cows in, and then they could shut it and then open it the other way. So then, like they could redirect based on where they wanted to go in the pen, and like, making funky garden tools, because my uncle's a voracious gardener. Shout out Fred. So it can be both. Everyone had, there's Picasso's of the world, there's Michelangelo's.
Right. In that situation, I think the point would be, when he was making that hinge, was it just a square on a hinge, or did he take the time to make some loop-de-doos and some squirrely little?
He just made it out of the heaviest plate that he had. He made it as big and heavy and
right. And that's where
it was all function.
It's all function, but the form is appealing to you because you like that industrial look.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So the form, maybe that's the point here, is the form has to be there. Or I'm sorry, the function has to be there. There shouldn't be two F words. The function has to be there, and the form is in the eye of the beholder, where something like that's big and heavy and industrial, you and I might think it's absolutely gorgeous because that's what we're drawn to. Whereas somebody like Logan, would be more into something a little bit more ornate with some squirrely guys and some loop-de-doos. And you know, and I haven't really talked to Logan about his preference on hinges, so maybe I'm wrong. But I think that there is something that feels really good about taking something that's been in your shop for a while. Like I had the idea, I was going through, there's already some cabinets hung up in my shop, and it was like, these just look like 1980s bathroom cabinets.
Because they probably are.
But they probably are, right. When they remodeled the house, they took the cabinets out and put them back into the farm. And so I was thinking, like, how can I use these? I don't want to take them down. They're good cabinets. But this is going to be a blacksmith shop. How do I take the 1980s bathroom out of my blacksmith shop? And it was like, well, you know, I could make the handles out of old railroad ties or old punches and chisels that have been torn to snot. And, you know, like, so that it's like that same kind of idea of I've created a new function out of something that I believe the form is beautiful in. Because those are the you know, like when we sold Aaron Sorgel siding twice in one podcast. When we sold him the 120, he sent you that punch that changes directions in your hand. And that was super cool.
You were very mad that it was for me.
Yeah, I was super mad that it wasn't for the shop. It is gorgeous. Aaron, if you listen, I wouldn't mind another one getting sent. Just saying. But there will come a day where it's torn to snot and you're not going to be able to use it, or it's just too much work to get it to be usable. And the function of it is gone, but it's still a good looking tool. You can make a handle out of it. You can possibly make a latch out of it or something else, but finding the function in a form that preexists. I understand what you're saying. You can always find the function and the form is what creates the draw or the appeal. And it's going to be viewed differently by different people. You know, work that other people do might not match my idea of a form that I would seek after in my own forging. But if the function's there, it works. So I might.
All right, we are recording. You want Taco Bell?
All right. Yes, I do want Taco Bell.
Didn't Evan say he was going to Taco Bell?
Evan said he's going to Taco Bell.
I guess I can go to Taco Bell.
Okay, so we are back in a podcast full of interruptions this week. Our computer hit its limit and it said no mas. So we're going to live mas. At
For
Taco
sure.
Bell. So
I need some of that.
we were talking about function over form, and I had said that it really doesn't benefit me to have a tool that is purely form and no function. And you had mentioned right as we lost data and stopped recording, you had mentioned a very good point about there is something that is fulfilling about using a tool that has great form and great function. And the first thing I thought about was this hammer. That's heavier than when I picked it up
6
5
pounds.
minutes ago.
6 pounds.
This is a beautiful hammer.
6 pound French.
Squeeze in.
He's got to readjust everything.
He's got to.
break the length.
This is
Got to pull the red cord.
there we go. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Oh, look at that. Look
If
at
you're
it.
just listening to the podcast, there's a 6 pound French peen on the camera, and it's very ornate.
So, if I go out to my shop and I go to pick up a hammer, I probably am. I'm probably going to pick this up, and I'm going to find more reasons and more uses for this hammer than I would if it were not engraved and there wasn't ornamental work on it. So, once again, as much as I try to always seem like there's no meaning in beauty, there is apparently, and I just need to admit it. So that is the conclusion I'm gonna smash
One of the
the table.
One of the questions on here is any lessons learned from making things that don't hold up. Yeah, for sure. I would say one of the most recent was when I was doing the stamping on the axe run. I kept having issues.
Is it that stamp?
No,
Oh.
that's one of them. This was one where I didn't do a rough draft. I just made the real thing. This is like 3-inch round of H13. Laser engraved the stamp into, set it on the thing. I was like, Bob's your chunkle. Well, no, in fact, it was terrible. So I ended up, I don't have it with me. Again, I need samples or props. I made a bunch of handled. That way I could make minute adjustments and then do the stamping operation. I found that if you make your stamps really, really, really short, 1 inch tall, and put a nice flat handle on it, I had the best success with that. If it's any taller than that, I start getting deviations and the stamp is crooked or it presses in at an angle. So I made them shorter and then shorter and then shorter and then shorter until finally it's literally just like 3/4, 1 inch tall. And man, it just goes so good. So that was a recent lesson that I learned. Do you have any lessons that you've learned? Things that didn't hold up that you wanted or needed to?
Honestly, anytime that I have a question about whether something is going to be functional or not, I grab you or Charlie, and I kind of have. I as much as I talk about go make something, don't be afraid to fail. I kind of am afraid to fail, and I do. Fortunately, have safeguards with you guys, and I can put down a project if I have questions and pick up another one. And I still have a backlog of probably 7 or 8 people that I owe hammers to that I can go and, make a hammer I know how to make, but then I'm making one that's a new design. Like if I was making a French peen, I've got tons of questions. If I'm making just a regular rounder,
Also,
I can get that done. God bless it.
this was made by Royalty Forge, if anyone's wondering. Did you just spill that all over the floor?
Did I or did you?
Bless America, Francis.
Look,
Now producer Evan's got to spring into action.
Evan is running. He's our cohort. That trash can is full of paper towels. Holy crap! There's like only paper towels in that trash can.
Yeah, everybody wants to poop in the fancy bathroom.
Yeah, why don't we have a trash can in the bathroom? There's enough room.
If you notice, we don't put trash cans in bathrooms in this building. They're always outside the bathroom because it's more versatile.
I feel like that's a weird part of kata. Yeah, but there's definitely been stuff that I make that is not functional the way that I would like it to be. But offhand, there have been times where good things have happened. I made a hammer for Nate Howitt, and while I was making it, I decided, I am done forging.
Thanks, producer Evan.
And I just want to get this thing done. And I thought I could grind out the peen a little bit more than I did, and he ended up with a super big peen on the end of on the back of his hammer, and I actually really like it. So there's another example of Logan made me what unfortunately has become my favorite hammer because Logan made it. But it's essentially a ball peen, but he screwed up while he was grinding the rounding side of just a regular rounding hammer. And it has become my absolute favorite. So there's times where you mess up and it doesn't perform the function that you wanted it to. And if you follow it through, you'll find its functionality. So little bit of hope in the gray there.
One of the questions is, why are utility projects often where skills improve the most? I think it's a strange question, producer Evans. Strange question, but I think the question is kind of like, I take it as when I'm forging something or I'm building a tool for pure functionality. Some of my recent die sets are a great example of that. They're ugly as sin, but going for pure functionality, you have a practical and measurable success or failure.
Right.
And so you get a true result. When it's form based, maybe you have a drawing of a scroll you're attempting to recreate, but oftentimes it's a lot more subjective.
Subjective.
So
Subjective.
so if you're trying to build something for function and it doesn't work, you failed. If you're trying to build something for beauty, it's kind of up to you whether or not you failed.
Right.
So I think there's a push against your technical ability when you're building something functionally.
Well, necessity is the birthplace of
Mother
invention.
of invention. It's the mother.
My mother is not
My
an
mother
inventor.
told me you are the very best one, and you are not.
I think when you're forging for function, you're typically forging out of necessity. It needs to do something. So that's why it's going to give you, how do we word it? That's where it gives you the improvement, because you actually have to match the function of what you're trying to do. You can't have a delineation that goes into, well, I would like it to perform this, but I also want it to look this way. It can't look that way and do this thing, then it can't look that way. There's a clear cutoff there.
Yeah, for sure.
So you have to find new techniques, and you have to figure out a lot of it, honestly, within my own work has been in like material size. Like I want to start with this material size because I have it on hand. And then I go to do it. It's like, I can't get that out of this material. And I was talking earlier with the knife, when you're forging out of 1/2-inch rebar, you're not going to be able to pull a knife out of a 4-inch piece of 1/2-inch rebar.
Yeah, you can do like a little. What's the little Japanese?
Tamagotchis.
It's like a super sharp little like letter opening knife.
Kiridashi. A Kiridashi.
Kiridashi.
Yeah, you probably do a
make a
Kiridashi.
Oh, for sure.
But I try to start with what's on hand because I'm cheap, and a lot of times I just can't get there. And
I think you don't even. I've done that a long time, and you don't even recognize that that's the obstacle you need to fix. Instead, you're like, well, if I was just better. It's like, actually, I've learned that through and through. It's like, no, your starting stock size was wrong.
Right.
And I've been able to work with people at a professional level that are tripping over that same stumbling block because they didn't know that the material they actually needed came in the dimension that, we talked about that.
Yeah.
We had a company that was working with us that was forging their material out of round, and it was we turned like a 12 heat process into a 3 or 4 heat process just by moving to the correct starting stock size. So it can be a dramatic change to the whole
starting your project at the closest possible shape and size and material weight is revolutionary. Now, understand, when you're forging an axe, if you buy a 4-pound billet, you're going to get a 3.5-pound axe or whatever. But Logan is super good at it. He can visually look at something and understand dimensions and say, yeah, you can draw this out here, you can draw that out here. You'll have to cut off this excess material and this will end up here. Nope, that's not going to be big enough. And he can just do it visually. I can't do that. I look at something and it's like, yeah, I'd probably make it work. And I never can. The only example I really have of making it work is within things that I make out of form. When I make shepherd's hooks or even the little bottle openers, I can do that out of 5/8. I can do it out of 1/4. I can do it out of half. Whatever. But when I'm making something that needs to be functional, if somebody says I want a 3-pound hammer and I want 1.5-inch faces and a number 4 handle, I have to start with the right material because I can't get that out of our 1 1/4 by 1 1/4 1018. That's just not going to happen. Now I can get it out of our 2x2 by 5, but I'm going to have a lot of excess material that needs to go away, which presents another problem. So I think that's where forging to function has impacted me the most, is really understanding the physics of how material moves, where it moves to, what you're able to do, and how much material you need, and getting close to that finishing stock size with your starting stock size is so important.
What is an example of a go-to piece every smith should try making?
I'm on the kick because of Kurt. Dude, Gates. Gates. They have just about anything you can think of.
Well, sure.
You have to draw material out for your scrolls. You have to do scrolls. There's often many various types of scrolls in the gate that you're trying to do. There's forge welding. There's mortar and tenon. There is, if you do the
Mortar and tenon?
mortise and tenon.
Mortise and tenon.
My bad.
That's okay. I couldn't remember what it was supposed to be.
Yeah. If you do the Mark Asbury style, you are doing 90-degree bends, which he taught me a really cool trick. He took half-inch bar and he brought it over and he said, I want you to draw this side out and draw this side out and leave a teardrop in the middle. Mm-hmm. And so we drew that out, did a teardrop in the middle. And he said, okay, now what you're going to do is you're going to take that over to the swage and take a piece of half-inch round, and you are going to hammer that in to the middle V, whatever. And it left a crisp 90-degree with a beautiful, perfect round on the inside of that 90-degree turn. That's something that I think people would typically either forge weld or do a tenon on, or beat their heads against the wall trying to figure out how to get that over the anvil and not lose that material on the inside of the turn. So I think gates are something that everybody should do just because they're all inclusive. They have a ton of, if you're doing a gate, you probably are buying the round and the square, but I would say do a gate with one starting. And this goes completely against what I just said, but do a gate starting with one stock size and having to square round bar off or round square bar and learn how metal moves and how it fits together and how all of the different techniques of what you're learning. Because you can go take a class and they might teach you scrolls one week, drawing, or they probably teach you drawing before scrolls. But, they kind of teach you in increments, and then gates is really the first place that it all comes together. I think it's a great group project, and I also think it's something that everybody should be able to do on their own, just because so many techniques are involved, and there is both form and function. Your gate has to have hinges, it has to have latch, it has to swing, it has to shut, it has to lock.
Right. Well, and that brings up a key point too, because a secondary part to all this is, when you're building something that has to fit into a pre-existing spot, you've got to hit the dimensions. You've got to get the material where it needs to be. It can't be too large. It can't be too long. It's got to be the shape. It's got to be square. It's got to be all the things, or you're working on something old. It's got to be crooked just right. It's
right.
Like making something to a drawing is much harder than winging it and getting pretty close. And so I think setting the expectation that you need to take the dimensions, lay it out, and follow the layout is a good execution on a myriad of skills.
John McClellan, actually, while I was out in California, was sharing with me that he does a lot of gate and railing installations, just what you would think about when you think about somebody that does, and restoration as well. But he got a job at some college, and they had the engineering students send drawings over, and this is what we want, and whatever. And it was so big stone pillars, and then there were, I guess you would still call it a gate, but it doesn't open. What would you call that?
Just a fence, a railing?
Yeah, railing, fence, whatever. That closed off between the pillars so that you could only walk through the walking path, but there were these big openings, and he got all the drawings and he said they were all 18 inches on center and all this stuff. You measure it, whatever. And they got there, and this one was 18 inches, that one was 24, that one was 16. They had only measured one of the openings between the pillars, but the pillars were built in like 1910 or 1912 or something like that. So the ground had settled and started to lean, or this had gotten broken off or whatever. So That's just a fun installation story. But he had to go and he had to take the measurements he was given and make 6 or 12 or however many of these fences. And there's twists and bends and all kinds of stuff in that. And I think that's a good, I think Abana and CBA consider it level 2 curriculum. And I think that's a really good place to start with. Am I a self-sufficient blacksmith? Can I build something with 90-degree bends? Can I build something with forge welding? Can I build something with mortise and tenon? Can I make a latch? Can I make hinges? That's something that everybody should at least try if they're trying to challenge themselves.
Yeah. I think if you're just trying to get started learning, one of my favorite early, and we've done a class on this, is to do leaf hooks. Forging a leaf, especially if you're trying to make a realistic leaf, is a lot of fun. It's very satisfying when you get it right. And when you get it wrong, it just looks like a broken leaf, and it's not that bad, but then you get a fun little wall hanger. My kids love to do leaf hooks with me because each one can be different. So each kid's looks like they made it. And then we go in the house and screw it up on the wall and they hang their jacket on it. And it's like the perfect amount for a small project when you're just getting started, you have a little bit of time. Or if you're working with kids and getting them introduced to hammer control and here's how the material moves, here's how you pull a taper. And I usually do the leaf and then a little stem and a little squirrely cue. And then we punch the holes. I like to bend it and punch the holes off center so it gives it more of a natural look. So,
I
there's
think
opposite ends of the
leaves are really good for
challengings.
beginners as well because it's expandable. You can make a leaf with a hook and it's a leaf with a hook. Or you can show it to Charlie and then in 3 hours he comes back with a realistic looking leaf, and instead of punching out the holes, he's twisted around the approximate diameter of a screw and and so it has twists and then all of a sudden, I want to put thorns on it. So he figures out a way to forge thorns on it or draw them out of the material. And so that's something that teaches you not only how the material moves and how to fuller things out and good chisel work, but also control, because it's really easy to turn a leaf into just something flat very quickly. I think leaf's a very good thing for a beginner, and then intermediate to go back and say, okay, well, how can I do this better? And
you get a really direct, you can see immediately how you've improved.
And you can do 15 of them in a day.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's a lot of
15 in an
room
hour.
for practice.
Those are rookie numbers. Gotta bump those numbers up. What's the one old tool on your farm or shop that you just can't seem to get rid of, even if it's broken, rusted, and been replaced?
Nathan,
that would be
my old tool that I can't get rid of.
I think that would be a great question for the interwebs. No, we don't use hashtags. Tag us at Coal Ironworks. Take a picture of your one old tool or piece of gear that you can't get rid of. You just love it. I'll say mine is a 5-ton lifting chain that my dad's shop threw away when I was a kid. I've drug it to every house, every shop, every state I've ever been in. I can't use it for anything because it's so big, but it's just so cool. That I can't get rid of it. And my kids use it to hook to the tractor and drag each other around the yard with it. It's very impractical.
Yeah.
So far.
I have a toolbox that you gave me that is just an open box. It doesn't have any sort of storage. It's like a lunchbox was turned into a giant metal toolbox.
Did you steal something from
No. The moment it has more than 5 things in it, it is unmanageable to carry around, but it is a carrying hand toolbox. But
I have no recollection.
Sits on top of my other toolboxes. I don't have a lot of machinery or equipment. A lot of my hand tools that were given to me by my father and grandfather were pawned in a darker part of my life by friends who I shouldn't have trusted. But that one sticks around, because it was given to me by a friend who when I was starting out in blacksmithing, you were generous with all the things that you didn't want ended up at my house. And it was like 50-50. It was like, oh, like I could use that. And the other half was like, I think Nathan doesn't want to throw it away, so he knows I'm going to keep it. So if he gives it to me, it doesn't get thrown away.
When I was helping clean out the Kennedy facility, I was looking through this stuff, and Max Sr. came up to me, and I said, I don't think we're going to be able to use any of this stuff. And he said, if it ends up in the scrap bin, I don't care. Just don't let me see you do it. And walked away. And I was like, that's what I'm going to say now.
Yep.
It is like, I can't emotionally take you throwing this very valuable artifact away.
Yep.
I also can't use it or need it. So just do it when I'm gone.
Well, like I have the first hammer you ever made, and I did a little bit of cleanup work, put it on a handle, and you know, that hammer's not going to be used. And if it does, it does. But it's never going to be my go-to. The knowing that, you know, you gave that to me because of that scenario that you just said, where it's like, I don't want this to end up away, but it is just taking up room, you know, whatever. I have a tote full of your first tongs, and that will end up getting scrapped. I just am going to do it when you don't realize it.
It's fine. Just don't let me see it.
Exactly. So that would be mine. That's just me in general. Is it's going to be something that has some sort of small emotional attachment to it, and the function doesn't really matter.
So once again, tag us on Instagram a picture of something that maybe you never use, but you just can't get rid of. You know?
Evan, what are we giving away for this tag? We haven't done a giveaway in a couple weeks.
Let's make a Kurt shirt.
Who won my shirt?
I have not. I've not gone over those entries yet.
Are we supposed to announce that entry in this, and you didn't put it on?
It's gonna be next week.
Okay, so next week we'll give away my shirt,
gosh.
and then we'll make a Kurt shirt.
And by next week, the updated 12-ton punch and stripper will be up on the website. We had a little snafu-y.
Yes.
So updated punch and stripper set for the 12-ton. I showed those last week. They looked amazing. I thought they would be launched today. It's going to be next Wednesday. That's okay, guys.
It's totally fine.
We just wanted to make sure we had enough on hand before we said go.
Yep.
Because we made a oopsie before. We've done that. Anything else, Producer Evan? All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Francis, it's so nice to have you back. Your unavoidable musk has returned. So I hope you guys have a wonderful, lovely, incredible, incredulous day. And we'll talk again real soon.
We'll see you guys at Bob's.
Bye. Got a good throat sound there as you doused your viscera in sugar water. That one wasn't nearly as good. All right.
I have to go to heat treating.
Will you get lunch? Also, you need to be back for our meeting at 12.